in engineering. We've heard, even from this morning, the difficulty of practicing across various geographies right on our continent. We have a set of people who will share with us their experiences, and this is a discussion where we can explore around what are the challenges and how do we overcome those challenges. The first panel member that I will ask to the stage is Engineer Abel Ngadu. Engineer Abel, a round of applause for him, please. While he's making his way, I will ask Engineer Avi Menon as well to join us on the stage. Next up, I will ask Engineer Papias Kazawadi to join us on the stage as well. And lastly, Engineer Martin Manua. Colleagues, the mobility of engineering skills, or skills in general, has been something that has been seen and has enabled many economies and many continents to advance in their technological and technical capabilities. We have seen, even in Europe, I think that in Italy there was the Renaissance era, and artists and engineers like Michelangelo, for those who don't know, he was an engineer, were sought after in different locations. If the town of Pisa wanted a structural engineer, they would get someone from another town. That's why they don't blame anyone from that town. They say that that structure is leaning because someone came from another town. But we've also seen in the Industrial Revolution where a lot of inventions were made. But when we bring it here at home, we see that there are various challenges in engineering skills mobility. That being said, with our continent being the continent that holds some of the best potential in terms of economic advancement and what we can do with infrastructure. So, Engineer Ngadu, I would like you to maybe start off this conversation and maybe just give us some context, particularly in your experience, and maybe before that, give us the experience that you have in working in different areas with various engineers as well.
No, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think my name is Engineer Abel Ngadu. I'm actually the current president for the Engineering Institution of Zambia in Zambia, but I'll speak here as a managing director of a company called Ngadu Consulting, the company that I founded with my colleagues from Zambia. And why I'll talk about why this topic is important is because my company, Ngadu Consulting, does not only do work in Zambia, but we also have done work in the DRC as well as in Rwanda, in Kigali. So that's why I think I'm very much interested in your topic. Ngadu Consulting, for the people who might want to know, is a civil engineering consulting firm which has been in existence for the last 20 years. And we've done quite a number of work in Zambia in terms of the road sector, in terms of design of roads, geometric pavement design. We've done structural engineering works. We've done a lot of transportation planning as well. So we are quite diverse in the area of operations. About 2010, we had made a decision to start doing works outside Zambia. And the first country that we approached was Rwanda. So when we went to Rwanda, We thought Rwanda was very similar to other African countries. By the time we went there, we found that even when you compare Rwanda to Zambia in terms of registration of, for example, registration of companies, we found that Rwanda had adopted a sort of one-stop shop. They have got, I think, an organization called RDB, Rwanda Development Board. So when we went to Rwanda, we didn't have a lot of challenges. Of course, the first challenges we had initially, because that was 2010, was maybe issues to do with language. Okay, maybe when you are talking to, maybe there was a bit of French, a mixture of French, but we were able to navigate through with English. When you go to RDB, everyone was able to speak English. So when we did the application to open a company, it was very smooth. I remember, I think it took, we went early in the morning. By the time we reached afternoon, I think about 4 or 5 o'clock, our company was already registered. So it was quite efficient in the way we registered our company. So Ngandu Consulting Rwanda was born in one day. Of course, we had gone there before to explore business opportunities for engineering works. But after we made a decision, when we said we want to go and register, there was no delay. We registered same day. We paid, and you go through different tables until you are sorted out. So in terms of that, we did not have obstacles. Then the next thing, we had to set up a company in terms of, putting up, looking for offices. Again, it was very smooth. Sending money from Zambia to Rwanda, very smooth. You send money, you get it. We bought furniture and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have any problem. Then at that time, there was no Institution of Engineers Rwanda. I think Papias, was it there in 2010?
2010.
Oh, did you have, yes. 2010, there was
passed in 2012.
yes, there was no Institution of Engineers Rwanda. Wow. So our engineers were not required to register in Rwanda. So the Zambian Engineers Mobility were able to move to Rwanda quite easily without any problems. The only problem that we had, of course, is issues of language. And also as a company, issues of, double taxation, this withholding tax, those things, you go through it. But generally, we do not have those problems.
No, thank you for that introduction. I hope that you left an Institute of Engineers in Rwanda by now.
Yes. Now, of course, when Institution of Engineers Rwanda came in, yes, of course, now a bit of obstacles started. They said you need to register, you need to, the same requirements. And I'm happy to talk about them because, as African Union, we need to address this matter.
Yeah.
Okay, because Zambia, we've got Engineering Institution of Zambia. Rwanda has got its own institution. Every country has. So when you go there, even if you go with EIZ membership, you cannot practice there. You need to register as a member of Institution of Engineers Rwanda.
Indeed. I think we'll explore that topic a bit more, but a round of applause. We do have an Institute of Engineers in Rwanda. Engineer Avi, pleasure to see you. Please give us your context and your experiences around mobility of engineering skills on the continent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually a member of SciC Council, but I'm representing my company here, Coleco. We are a traffic engineering company. We do civils and water. And we are only 9 years old, so we are a young company, but we are in 11 countries as of today. We started in 2014, and then in 2016, we realized that we can't stay in South Africa alone because of the market was shrinking, and we needed to look outside. And it was a strategic decision we made, and in 2016, we ended up with a project in Mozambique. It was a client that we had here in South Africa who was building 4 filling stations in Mozambique, and we said, okay, let's go. How hard can it be? We got there, and then we realized the approval process is very different from the approval process here. It took way longer than it does here. Not that South Africa is very quick, but it's a lot worse that side. So we weren't, from a budgeting standpoint, we weren't prepared for that travel, additional meetings that we had to have. There's extra design work that they required, which we got stuck with. But ultimately, it was a decision that we made that we want to open an office in Mozambique. So we went through the ropes, we got it done, and then finally, ultimately, we opened an office in Mozambique once we were done with the 4 projects. So it came with its own set of challenges. For example, the language was a big problem. The reports that we wrote were in English, and then we had to get somebody to translate it to Portuguese. And even the translator, we struggled quite a lot because there were a lot of technical words and phrases which were used. All the technical drawings had to be converted into Portuguese, so that also is, I mean, it wasn't something that we anticipated, but it was a lot hard then, but having done it a few times now, we are more in for the game.
All right, thank you for sharing your experiences. A round of applause for Engineer Vic. Engineer Papias Kazawadi, I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on this and your experience.
Thank you very much, moderator. My contribution will simply continue from where Engineer Ngandu ended. I would like to share the experiences in the East Africa. In the East Africa, after the East African Commission heads of government requested that all the professionals, especially engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants, I think with some doctors and others, they initiated a mutual recognition agreement, which implied that when an engineer or a doctor is registered in any member state country, is not required to come to go through the processes of registration in another country simply because he has to be working there. What we harmonized is that an engineer from Kenya, if he gets a project in Rwanda or in Tanzania, he's simply required to show his registrations with the same professional body in Kenya. If his license is new and valid with his home country, for us, we do it just automatically. There is no questioning, no examination, no other testing. Because we believe same institutions have taken all the processes to grade and to ensure that this person is competent.
Apologies, Engineer. I think that maybe there is, on that side, we're just hearing a bit of the conversation there, please. I think that let's just keep it down and give our esteemed engineers the opportunity.
So, as for in promoting the mobility of engineers, we need to have the due considerations of the movement. The movement may be said that it is free, but when you go there, restrictions, the amount of fees imposed, the processes of registering a foreigner. So all of those needs to be harmonized in a framework within the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But as engineers now at the federation level, we believe you cannot simply take engineering in the practice alone without touching on the education, on how the engineer is brought to get to the level of a professional. In our morning session, we had a discussion of which the outcome that we reached at is to establish our own, what we call the accord. This accord will have like a prototype framework that any country wanting to implement AFCTA to enable the mobility will simply take that and customize it. Because today, we believe that, yes, the engineering is the same that we study in different, but there are different circumstances and irregularities in terms of the countries itself. Because we know that there is no size that fits all, that's why in our morning discussions, in fact, the Association for Development of Education in Africa is willing to be the custodian, where we can establish the engineering education policy and professional practice accreditation manual, which will mean that if someone has trained in South African universities and the universities are accredited in accordance with the rules of South Africa, it will have certain similarities and level of standard with the one studied in Niger or in Nigeria or in Gabon, without considering the language barriers that we have always taken as challenges. There may be some challenges, but once there is a document that is a prototype, which includes all the necessary framework and the basics, it will be much easier to promote the mobility. And those restrictions, of course, we always have limitations where we can't. But then, since we are on the table and wanting to be more on many tables, we believe that when those regulations will be reviewed, even the bottlenecks that are in now may be unlocked. So, what do I request engineers themselves to consider is that amongst ourselves, we still have the colonial mentality because of the education we get. Some of us can still measure the level of skills and competencies of someone by looking at how fluent he or she speaks the colonial master's language. So this is a mentality that needs, for me, I always want to give the example of China. Chinese, they learn English or French depending on the interest they have on it. When you attend their presentation, to them it doesn't matter whether he has spoken a good English, and yet they are accepted because of their competencies. Their knowledge and skills are not measured through speaking fluently English or French. So we need to also adopt this type of mindset. We have had our past, we know it, we cannot remove it, but let's improvise our own that make it easy. When you are setting exams, for example, in accrediting a graduate engineer, because of the school that he went through, sometimes he's not that fluent. Like, for example, for me personally, I started learning a single word of English after getting to the secondary. Form 1. I had never attended any English class. Now, if you compare my English with someone who started it in nursery school, definitely we can't be the same. But the science language, the engineering language is the same. The formula are the same. So this will even empower us to develop our own customized solutions in our local languages. Another problem of the past education that we had, and this audience needs to know. For example, where I studied primary school, you could not go to primary when you are less than 8 years because you are moving long distance. When you go to school late, the punishment to the pupil is to go to dig in the farming. Now, you grow up seeing agriculture as a punishment. How will you ever be motivated to go to farming even when, if people say this has money, there is opportunity, but I was punished even when I was still young. So I can still see that as a punishment. So if we don't change our mindset and the way we take our education and we measure the capabilities and the capacity, we will not make steps
Yeah.
further. So, considering now the mobility, you can't have the mobility if we don't have harmonized standards
Yeah.
of practice and of education and upbringing. But English and French and other languages are important. But what is most important is the technical skills that are translated in our own way, even if possible, in our local languages, so that our young children can understand better. We spend a lot more time learning foreign languages than learning the skills can get us out of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Papias. You know, Engineer Papias, I thought you were going to say that that's why you don't eat vegetables to this day. You don't.
No, I don't have a farm because I have always seen it as a punishment. So.
No, thank you. Engineer Martin, I know you thought I was going to ask you to give an introduction, but you know, you look like a very smart man, so I'm going to ask you some very difficult questions. If we look at what our esteemed colleagues shared here, not one of them said the problem is the technical elements. It's all these soft skills, these soft issues. There are issues of language. There's also issues of business, double taxation. There's legislation, how work is approved. Now, our colleague talked about creating this framework that allows us, or that can pave the way for us to bridge these gaps. In your view, what would be, if we were to live here and we had to go back to our policymakers and gave them 3 things that they can do to support us, how can they take it forward?
Thank you very much, Mandla, for that. I think I bear a lot of experiences with my colleagues working across Africa, especially. You meet all these barriers, some of them technical barriers, others non-technical, others tariff even barriers. I think going back to policymakers, engineers, we need to talk more to policy. For instance, when we want to supply our services, engineering services across the borders, there are 4 modes that we can supply those services. One is you can have a commercial presence like Ngandu established. I actually went to his office in Kigali. That's a commercial presence. We need to be equipped with the technical skills to be able to know, the rigmarole of registration, the laws, to comply, to do all sorts of things from one border to the other. The other one is you can supply your services whilst in Harare, Zimbabwe, to Canada, to Zambia, digitally or otherwise. That's cross-border engineering services. You do your drawings. And with partnerships as engineers, that's mobility as well. If we work together as engineers across the countries, we then establish your partnerships. ZADG, with this firm, I know they did a good interchange. We are doing the Mbudzi, working with colleagues of Tensor on the Mbudzi interchange. We could then exchange the Tensor, or the drawings, everything else that we can on a commercial basis. The other one, the most difficult, and we want the policymakers to assist, is the commercial presence. When I now take my passport to go to Lusaka to get some work there, then all problems, all hell breaks loose. Where are you from? Why are you coming here? What are your qualifications like? Let's have a look. What have you done? Etc., etc. Don't we have your skills here? So that's the movements of natural persons. This one, to override it, I think we need our countries to have what we call economic partnerships agreements. These agreements may be most nation to nation. Some countries you can say, look, I'm from Kenya, you cross into Uganda, we are friends. There may be a few barriers, like you pay your subscription twice, you pay IEK, you also pay the other, and at the end of the time you are paying 5,000 or so, and you are not doing any job in Uganda. you complain about that. But that's friendly fire. So the EPAs, the Economic Partnership Agreement, should remove some barriers where countries now, through policy, should agree to open up certain areas. Like we can say, if it's engineering design, we can allow a design of not less than $5 million to be done by the person who is coming from outside, because we want to protect our industry to this strength. If it's complex, then there can be that economic partnership agreement. So that's a policy level agreement. The other policy issue we want is harmonization frameworks. My president has spoken to the MRAs. They are not as easy as just signing a piece of paper. You have to go and do conformity assessments, quality assurance. You have then to have some substantial equivalence measurements to see whether the qualifications in that country or the country you want to do services in are substantially equivalent. And I will tell you, I don't know whether Liz is here or not, even for those members that are in IEA, it's not easy. I was talking to our colleagues from Malaysia and China, and even the UK. It's not easy, even when you are Washington Accord countries, to just move, pick a plane and say, now I've come to do my service here. You come face to face to those barriers my colleague spoke about. Those barriers Papias talked about. So there's a whole lot of a jungle that we need to navigate about mobility. So our part as the engineers or engineering professional bodies is to put our house in order. One, to ensure that we comply to the agreements that are existing. We work towards an accreditation manual. We then also have an independent accrediting body in our country, and also we regulate engineering in our country so that a perception into those countries we are going to give services will be safeguarded by the standards that you have. So that's one other thing. Finally, I always insist on ethical, competent practice. We must ensure that our institutions have a uniform or at least substantially equivalent code of ethics and professional guides that cuts across borders so that we can seamlessly work in other economies. Thank you.
Thank you for that. A round of applause, please. And you mentioned something very interesting, that the opportunities for engineers in Africa is not just on the continent, but to export our skills using the power of technology.
Yes.
Probably would be far more competitive than the Europeans and the American counterparts as well. So that is something that I think that is something that maybe in our next conference would be something we can explore. Now, Engineer Avi, I want to come with the whole aspect of how has it been with integrating your company in a foreign country. Already there is a barrier. We know that being a developing continent, there is always this fear that there are outsiders who are coming to take opportunities. You have a lot of young people who are becoming conscientized to become activists, which we can see happening all over in the news. Now, what are some of the things that maybe you have effected to work better in collaboration with local partners, local ventures, and that sort of thing?
I think I'll come in on this. First of all, I think if I talk about Zambia, if you go on the ground, say, even among us, Association of Consulting Engineers, most companies, when they see foreign firms come to Zambia, the first thing they will do, they will resent. Because in the past, they used to be, you find a foreign company comes in, they are given 100% contract They don't want to partner with the locals. Because that's the beginning, that's where the problem comes in. So people have developed this defense mechanism to protect the country from any foreign competition. But the good news is, I think things are changing now. If we have to, I think what everyone is looking for is a win-win situation. For example, in Zambia, they passed a law under the Zambia Public Procurement Authority, the ZPP Act, I think it's 2019. The law is very clear. It has clearly stated that no foreign firm can come into the country and be given 100% project. You cannot. You have to partner with the local. It became now, it was mandatory. Before it wasn't. Because foreign firms, when they were given the opportunity, they had spoken to, that please, when you come to Zambia, can you partner with the locals? They wouldn't do it because it was not compelling. Now they had to put it under the law. You remember there was that Africa Free Trade area, I think there was an effort now, trading services, where I think even our country, I don't know whether I can confirm or not, but I think we are moving towards the country signing on the trading services. I remember they came to the Engineering Institution of Zambia. When they raised that issue, as president of EIZ, I presented that case with our members. The first thing they said, we hope our government has not signed it. Because they were saying we need to make it very clear to say, look, we can allow foreign competition as long as it's reciprocal. Okay? That's number one. I'm just saying the challenge is some of the issues. But of course, we had to make sure, look, we are part of Africa. We have to make sure we move in the direction. But the thinking was, why don't we have a reciprocal? If Rwanda allows Zambians to go to Rwanda, then we should allow them in equal numbers. But if Kenya or Zimbabwe does not allow us, we should also have that sort of, because you can't just open the country to everybody. But us as a company, okay, I'm just telling you those are the challenges that we have, which we need to deal with, okay? Now, as a company that I run with my colleagues, for us, our principle has been, if we are going to Rwanda, we have to utilize as much as possible the Rwandan engineering professionals. In fact, if we invest in Rwanda, the ultimate goal will be for the Rwandan operation to be run by Rwandese. Perhaps we should have just maybe shareholding, you know, we've taken it there, but ultimately they should take ownership of the company. If there's Ngandu Consulting Rwanda, fine. But the end game should be, it should be run by Rwandese. As when we go, of course there should be exchange. If they want expertise from Zambia, we can deliver that expertise through training and all that. But ultimately, they should be happy. They are taking their cut in terms of the finances, but they are also developing their own country. We've seen that kind of arrangement to be sustainable. Right now, Ngandu Consulting Rwanda is not run by Zambians anymore. We only go there if that expert backstopping is required to back them up. But otherwise, if they can source engineering professionals locally, then that's fine. We've seen that way. It does not raise a lot of conflict. Everyone is happy because they get their fair share. We also get their fair share as investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Avi, before we move to you on the same question, colleagues, if there are questions, please, after Avi, we'll be having a round of questions. I think to balance the diversity numbers here, I think the first question must come from one of our sisters from the crowd. Is that supported? Is that supported? Is there a no? Supported? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Engineer Buthelezi. I heard your yes.
Can I
Have you over you on the same question?
I agree with Engineer Abel on that. The reason we've been successful in 11 countries is because we look for partnerships. A part of it is you can't go and do business in another place without knowing the language, the culture, the people, to really understand it. I mean, they've been there for years. They've been doing business for years. So it's not easy for us to go there and just do the work. Technical knowledge, yes, we have it, but you know, you need that partnership, and we really look for a partner who aligns with our goals, aligns with our values as a company, and then we partner with them. So that's one reason we partner. The second is it's easier for them to manage the client than for us to manage the client from here. If there is a problem, the client usually says, come for a meeting tomorrow afternoon. And now you have to catch a flight and get there. It's going to be only next week, Tuesday. So that way it helps to have a local partner. And the third is obviously from a compliance standpoint. Most developing countries we worked in require a local sort of presence. It's only in the first world that they don't have that sort of a requirement from a local partnership. But when it comes to the registration, again, that's still a problem. Wherever you work, the registration continues to be a problem. So yeah, so that's, we really rely on the partnership, and that's how we've established our Mozambique office with majority held in Mozambique by a Mozambican entity. The same thing with Uganda. One of our engineers, I was telling this earlier today, one of our engineers, she was from Rwanda, she was working in our Joburg office, and her then boyfriend, now husband, was in Uganda, and she wanted to move back and start a family. And then we said, okay, how do we help her with this situation? And then that's how, we said, okay, you can work remotely. This is in 2017. We said, okay, you can work remotely on our projects here, and I'll fly up a few times to help her with business development and picking up work that side. And that's how we picked up work in Uganda and Kenya. So yeah, we really look for partners here. We've worked with a lot of companies. Going for these conferences really help us a lot. The FIDIC and the WIFIO, and I've been in the Africa Engineering Week in Zambia in, I think about 2 years or 3 years ago, where we met with a lot of engineers. We still haven't got to work in Zambia, but hopefully this time around we'll get some work in Zambia. Thank you.
I think he's nodding. You might have a partner right here. All right, questions?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Maybe there's no one here, maybe I talk.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm Engineer Marawa. Just to make a comment, really, not to ask a question. I think the topic we are discussing of mobility, it should not really be only of engineers. But of course, we are talking in the context of our session, the way we are gathered here. Sometimes I also feel that ourselves, maybe we are thinking maybe too much inside the box. And when we want freedom, we are not asking to be taken out of jail. We want to remain in jail but still be free. And I think that cannot happen. Somebody, in fact, a lot of speakers today mentioned about the African Continental Free Trade Area. What does that actually mean? We trade in the free trade area. What are we trading? Goods and services, isn't it? And when you are talking of engineers' mobility, what are they providing? Services. So if we have a continental architecture that actually should be allowing to trade freely across borders, both in goods and services, the pre-assumption is that even if you are a trader, you must be able to see your customer and talk to them. You must be able to visit them. So there must be free movement at least. Why should we have visas? That's why Kenya actually announced, your president, I think, announced that they are going to actually have free movement for all Africans. Visiting, business, anything. One also assumes that we should have free movement of money itself. Of course, not through dubious means, but we should be able to actually send money within the system itself. And I think as engineers, if the architecture that allows the continental free trade area does not provide for the actual free movement of labor and people in order to provide the services that are intended in this good noble idea, then it will actually be stillborn. I think what we need to do is actually interrogate the architecture of the Continental Free Trade to see whether it allows us to do what we want to do and request for changes to be made at that level. I know Zambia is talking bilateral. If you want to trade with Zimbabwe, maybe it's fine because they are your neighbors. You get on the bus and you go. But to do that with every other 53 countries in Africa, I think it's a step back from the actual architecture of the AU that we put in place. So the continental instruments are there. They may be lacking, but let's not reinvent something. Let's make sure the intent is actually included in the legislative arrangements that actually underpin the instruments that we are putting across the continent. This is my contribution to say, let's now use our intellectual property rights as engineers to actually interrogate some of those things and propose changes so that we can do our job freely. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a question at the back.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's not a question. Let me introduce myself as Engineer Dennis Oladze from Botswana. I appreciate the discussion. And if I weigh into the mobility of engineers, my feeling is without necessarily negating what the last speaker said, I believe as engineers professionals, we can set an example or a model that can be copied if we do our things right by enabling mobility of engineers. And for me, it's not just about one entity leaving one country and doing business in another. It's why can't those be permanent and serve as exchanges? It doesn't matter to me if I'm a Botswana staying in Rwanda with Botswana engineers, provided Rwandese can be in Botswana doing the same thing I'm doing in Rwanda. Then that too, for me, would be 100% mobility. I shouldn't meet a policy that says, you've been here for 10 years, how many locals have you trained? Because that question says, do what you have to do and quickly replace yourself with the locals. And that to me was still receding to let each nation be practicing their own geographic restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Engineer Papias. Engineer Papias, maybe comments from yourself regarding the 2 points that our fellow engineers have raised from the floor.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the two speakers from the audience. But to complement what you just said, I want to share the few experiences that I have seen, especially after when I started getting into the leadership of engineering organizations. What I have seen is that on the basis of this morning's discussion by the President-elect Wufio, we cannot do much without data. I'll give you an example. The most vivid example that we have is that each one of us go back to your country. I'm not sure with Zambia, maybe the president will brief us on it. You will find that almost 50 to 60% registered, 40% not registered, and yet they are in the industry. Some countries, it is the opposite. Now, it even gets worse when a graduate engineer or a graduate engineering student gets appointments where the policies and decisions are made. It now becomes that these are the people who again get, when they are not registered, you will find that every time at policy level, if for example is a minister or a PS, we will say no, these institutions are making it hard for others They are creating unnecessary bureaucracies. And we have all these in our countries. It's only the percentages that differ, but we are not fully registered. What are the disadvantages of not having full data? Countries cannot properly plan in terms of employment and creating opportunities. Countries cannot determine what do they have as the gaps, because every time you will find in each individual country there is a capacity gap. But my question always comes, how can you sing the capacity gap song for 20 years without showing statistics of how you have improved? Remember, government is an overall and implements. These institutions are there to help you in the streamlining and creating consistency. When you appoint someone who has simply graduated because he is a Harvard graduate or Wits University graduate, thinks he's on top of others, that's also a mentality issue. Every time he will say, no, these ones are creating barriers for others to come. And in so doing, they are not telling the truth. At the end of the day, they will ask, we have our universities that have been graduating engineers. How many do we have so far? Where don't we have enough skills? Nobody will ever answer that because they don't have data. When they go back to the universities, they will say, 2015 we graduated 100 engineers. 2019 we graduated 58 engineers. But are those engineers practicing engineering? Because we have not created a channel where everyone to practice needs to go through that, the information that we always give are wrong. That's why we have a lot of high rates of unemployment. Even creating a situation where even some young ones say, no, why do I have to undergo all these processes? After all, I'm not employed. Even a person who have not gone through the processes is better off than me, better paid. So I think at the policy level and for the continental level through the AFCTA, we need to address that. For me, I find that if the professional bodies, especially in engineering, are empowered by governments, they become the third eye of the same government in terms of improving the quality and skills and competencies of their people. And so, creating the sustainability of the infrastructure they put in place, creating the database for the people they have, even for future planning. You have seen that the technology and science is changing, but you can start saying, yes, we have had enough civil engineers, our infrastructure is nearly in the 10 years, we don't need to construct, but we are lacking in the maintenance aspect. We are lacking in the mining because we have discovered there are a lot more mines to be explored and we need, but you cannot do that without data. So, my plea here is that the collaboration that have started, the success lies between the tripartite relationship between professional bodies, government, and the industry, which is the private sector. Without that, we will keep singing the songs that will never bring results. I thank you.
Engineer Manua, I'm going to give you the difficult task of being between this gathering and going for the braai. Let's have some last words from you.
No, thank you very much. I think let's put our minds together as a professional engineering body, the FAEO and WFEO, to work with the governments to put a framework for mobility. One that puts a tool where we have mobility instruments like the MRIs. We go then into the free trade area and fairly ensure that we export our services across borders. Let us use technology. Let us be innovative. I will tell you that our forefathers did not leave the use of stones to make weapons because they ran out of stone. They found iron. They also did not leave iron to go into other issues. So let's be innovative and increase mobility of engineering, and let us work as a team. Together, we'll go very, very far. Thank you.
With that, fellow engineers, that will be the end of the session, and let us proceed to the next session.
Thank you.
Oh yes, there is a braai arranged. Engineer, you want to give the announcement? A round of applause.
Thank you very much. So there is a braai session right now. So if you go downstairs to where the B2B session was, the business networking, continue. There is a deck outside. The marimba music is already playing, waiting to welcome you. So please enjoy the braai, and Manda will be hosting us for that event as well. So thank you very much for this session. We'll see you on the other side of this room, of this wall.
Okay. Thank you. Session adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It wasn't easy, eh? Especially when they keep talking.